Hey everyone, welcome to another episode from Ampro Engineering. This is the Tamiya Lancia Rally kit number 58040, or if you look at the original manual, you can say that it says 5840. This car, much like the Brat that came before it, is based on the ORV or off-road vehicle chassis. This is the second car to have this chassis, the first one being the previous vehicle in the Buyer's Guide series, the Tamiya Brat. Flip the car over, we can see that the chassis is absolutely identical down to the differential-less transmission. So this one has a spool like the Brat did. I did want to draw your attention to the on and off switch here. This car is very original. It does have this little rubber boot that is sandwiched between this on and off switch plate and the car's original bracket. This is installed reverse. The manual actually says to put it in with the switch upward, which kind of makes the switch housing sit a little low. That's why I've got it reversed. This is not a button, the switch is embedded, so if you push it, there it is on, and there it is off. This bracket here in the front is unique to the 037. This bracket bolts to the front bumper plate, which then has a small adapter for you to install the bumper, which this car is missing, which sticks out of the front of the car and will help to absorb some of the impacts that would otherwise destroy the front of the car or the lighting buckets on the car. It's actually a good time to note that all 6 of the car's front lighting housings are capable of accepting light bulbs. The same is true of the missing taillights, which I have recreated on our Shapeways page, both the car's original ones, which are intended to pop into this body without the retaining housing, which is typically missing, as well as a variant that has the signal and the parking light in the same housing. This particular example is a little worse for wear, but I have to admit that normally these cars are found much worse. The body shells are very prone to breaking, especially right along the center line of the front wheel arch. You can see that there's very little vertical overhang around 6 millimeters. And effectively that means that the car's body will simply fold or crack right through the middle. This car is damaged right there. If we flip it over, you can see that someone had previously repaired it, but it's a very common place for these things to break. Another area where they're absolutely going to break is straight through here. There is a lot of glass on this car, which does allow you to see the inside of the car. Tamiya does make an interior set for this car that did not come out when this car came out. It came out when Tamiya re-released the body. Now, before you get excited that this body is available, there is a caveat to that. It is not this body that will bolt onto this chassis. However, it is the mold that they used to make this body. What they did is produce a TA03 as well as a TA02 version on-road chassis with this body, but they actually welded up the mold inside here so that the car has a standard wheel arch and not this more exaggerated arch. I believe they've also done away with these holes in the front. You can actually tell on the re-release body, if you flip it over on the inside, you can see the original cutout area for these wheel arches. So you technically can buy that body to mount onto this car, but that's a story for another video. Let's focus on this for the time being. Some other bits that are unique to this car is the wheels and the tires. None of the other ORV cars are equipped with these wheels and tires. However, I do believe that the tires on this car were used on another one of the Tamiya rally cars. From what I can tell, the Opel Ascona and the Audi Quattro of about the same vintage have the same tires. However, I cannot locate another Tamiya with these wheels. If anybody is familiar as to another vehicle that does have these wheels, I would love to know. The good news is if your tires have perished, the re-release Willys Wheeler tires will fit these rims. However, the tire tread is very different. One thing to notice is that the Willys Wheeler wheels say Advan HF, and then the tire size right there along the perimeter. Whereas the Lancia Rally, interestingly enough, these say Michelin TRX. The tires that they are referring to are metric tires, which are very difficult to come by these days, but I'm fairly certain Michelin does still sell them for the cars in the 1980s that actually did run these tires. Let's go ahead and pull off the body. To do that, we have one body post here in the middle of the hood, and we have 2 on the side. We have one right here, and we have one here. Okay, the body should just lift right off. Like most of my cars, I do have my decorative mechanical speed control as well as the operational speed control. What you can see is that, like the Brat, it does have the bell crank in the center right here, driven by this servo. The servo saver resides on the bell crank and not actually on the servo. You have your mechanical speed control servo right next to it, which is a very tidy setup. If you flip the car over, you can see that the servos do hang out. In fact, the MSC servo hangs out just a tad from the bottom. What you can do is get the Frog skid plate, which will cover this up. Battery is installed here from the bottom as well. It's a really neat setup. You can either use the 6-volt Tamiya pack or the 7.2 Tamiya pack. I cannot use the 7.2 pack because this is usually where I keep my receivers. The 7.2 volt battery does have the 6th battery here on top, so it would have to occupy this room here. This car does have its factory rear shocks. These are friction shocks, but they are upgradable to those that are on the Frog. This is the factory 380 motor. It is not fast. However, on a vehicle of this vintage, in particular with this body, there's enough speed here. This also has this dual resistor setup, which Tamiya did away with a little bit after this car. I'm not entirely certain when, but they went with a more cost-effective alternative. This car also would have had this metal antenna rod, which would have stuck right in this hole here and then been retained by this screw and a little washer. And you would wrap the receiver's antenna wire around this, which I never cared for, so I did 3D print this little replacement part here. The problem is it comes very close to the body on the Lancia Rally, as this was the first time I've ever installed it on this car. So a little bit of sanding was necessary, but I think I'll have to remake this part for this car or simply do away with the antenna altogether with a 2.4 gigahertz radio. As I mentioned before, this car has not been re-released, so any example that you find will have the original gray chassis, which over the years does kind of yellow. Personally, I like the patina on this car because it does give it a little bit of history. Why don't we go ahead and take this car for a spin? Oh,
uh-oh.
Throw it in. There you go.
Maybe the best video ever.
Hmm?
Best video ever.
Me? So slow. I didn't lie when I said this car was not fast. It is what it is. It is equipped with a 380 motor, and this car was not targeted toward the racer. It was definitely targeted toward a step up from the beginner. The question is now, do you want one? And if you are a Tamiya collector, history would state that yes, you'd have to absolutely buy this car, especially if you're into the ORV series of cars. But comically, I have found that this car has a remarkable number of haters out there. They simply dislike the incredibly scale-looking body, completely ruined by massive cutout wheel arches, a ridiculous stance, and wheels that stick out too far. I believe that that gives this car a little bit more of a light-hearted feel. If you are into a very, very scale-looking version of this, the good news is, as I mentioned earlier, that is available. And if you want to build your own, it shouldn't be that hard to get an ORV car and simply, modify one of these bodies. You can probably even modify the Willys Wheeler wheels and tires to get them to fit this car. But for the really obsessive collector that wants their first 100 Tamiyas, this car is a no-brainer. If you are someone out there just looking to drive this thing around, my suggestion is look elsewhere. You probably want to go ahead and get a Brat because it is incredibly easy to find replacement parts, especially the body parts for the Brat. The good news on this car is that the chassis is all but disposable. I mean, everything is there. The problems with this car is rims and the effort required to create a body that does fit on this chassis. As of the filming of this video, this car has not been re-released, and unless Tamiya has several of these molds, it is unlikely that it will be re-released because they did modify the wheel arch in the mold, thusly preventing them from re-releasing this particular variant of the body. This car is a very unique bit of Tamiya history, and surprisingly, a decent one isn't going to be as expensive as you would think, at least as of the filming of this video. I think it again has to do with the fact that this car is not particularly loved in the Tamiya community. If you want something scale, find the TA02 or TA03 variants. They're absolutely stunning, and you'll start with a good basis for the body. If you want one of these, you're going to have to look for a little while. This one here came up on eBay a few years ago. It didn't sell for that much, but the car really needed quite a lot of cleaning up. A lot of things in this car were rusty, and the body, as you can see here, is in dire straits. It doesn't look too bad on the camera, but I fear that there are half a dozen coats of paint on this car, and who knows what other cracks and patch jobs are under this thing, so there's quite a lot to be fearful of with the body. Windows can be replaced because, again, Tamiya has re-released that, and I believe it is not that tinted. This isn't a dark tint, but it's not clear, and the re-release will have the missing taillights. It'll have all the headlight buckets, the rally fog light pack. What you're not going to get is the front bumper, the bracket, or the frame mount bracket that this car has. But a lot of the hard to find parts are in fact available for the body. I hope you liked this video. The next installment in theory is going to be the frog, but I may have to skip that because I simply don't own a stock frog. Nevertheless, we'll work our way through all of the ORVs, ending with the King Blackfoot. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and we will see you soon.